Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, the Viceroy of Verisimilitude, the master of fun and wonder, and of course, the existential Mr. Rogers, Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett, and I'm here with episode 238, I believe, of Robservations, the show about something. And you people, you are imagination connoisseurs that make up this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. My God, where would we be without the voice of sanity here at the Post-Geek Singularity community? First of all, I want to point out that this show is brought to you by Lucky Tiger Men's grooming products for those men who want to look good and feel great. And for those who don't already know, if you go to their website at getluckytiger.com, you can purchase any of their wonderful products, which, you know, I still like their overall, their body wash and, of course, their facial scrub made with bamboo. You can punch in PGS when you check out for Post-Geek Singularity. You get 20% off of your order. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I think I would be remiss if I didn't start out talking about an amazing thing that happened today, an amazing thing in the world of Star Trek. You know how much I love the world of Star Trek, and that amazing thing is, wait for it, my good friends, Mr. Jeff Bond and Gene Kozicki, who I knew in Seattle in the 1980s, their new book on the art and the special effects of Star Trek, the motion picture, a coffee table book, was announced by Titan Books today for May of 2020. It's going to be released. Why? What Star Trek news did you think I was going to talk about? Anyway, I'm very excited. As everyone knows, this year, 2019, is the 40th anniversary of Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which opened on December 7th of 1979. Still my favorite Star Trek film. Do I think it's the best? No. It's my favorite for a number of reasons. I went and saw it 2 weeks ago at the Fathom Events screening in Burbank. I took my lovely girlfriend, Elizabeth, and she saw it for the first time in the theater. She really liked it. It was, of course, the original theatrical release version. I prefer the Robert Wise Director's Edition that was released in 2001 on DVD in standard def. But still, I think it's the definitive version of the film. I hope one day cooler heads prevail and we will see it in 4K on, well, 4K. I have to say, I haven't gone there yet, but yesterday was a big 4K day. My pre-ordered steelbook that I ordered months ago for Stanley Kubrick, my favorite director, Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, released on 4K disc. Best Buy had the steelbook. Apparently, you know, it's readily available. It's not like a Marvel movie that sells out in advance, like Spider-Man Far From Home, which I forgot to somehow order. I do not have the steelbook. I do have the Homecoming steelbook. I have to buy it on the secondary market or whatever, but The Shining is out on 4K. Amazing. I haven't seen it. Can't wait. Actually, to be honest, The Shining is probably my least favorite Kubrick film. And it's his only foray into horror, really. And of course, he was already a literary adapter. I mean, everything he made, pretty much, from Nabokov's Lolita adaptation to Barry Lyndon, William Makepeace Thackeray, was, of course, Barry Lyndon. Everything Kubrick made, even Eyes Wide Shut, which I just saw a trailer for its 20th anniversary. My God, big Kubrick fan. Anyway, it was great. It is great. It will be great to acquire The Shining on 4K. But you know, I feel it's his first foray into simple genre entertainment, and it's great for what it is. But you know, one of the things I love about Kubrick is he's always dealing with the folly of mankind. His stories always, to me, seem so worried about different concerns. But The Shining is not. The Shining is strictly all about scaring people. He might have famously changed King's novel, but I liked it. I mean, but it is a simple genre B movie as far as Stanley Kubrick can go. But anyway, I want to share that all with you, which brings me the Star Trek The Motion Picture news. Of course, the news about Jeff Bond and Gene Kozicki. I'm, by the way, so happy for them. One of the great things about living in Los Angeles is I know many people who create things that I love. I've had friends, Zach Stentz, for instance, one of my very first champion after Free Enterprise. He's always been a friend. I was able to make sure he got hired to write his first feature script, Agent Cody Banks, with, of course, Ashley Miller, who I've been working with on another project. And it's great to see them succeed. Zach recently wrote Rim of the World that was on Netflix. So very, very cool. I always love it when my friends do cool things. I just love it. So to see Jeff Bond and Gene Kozicki write a book on the art and the visual effects of Star Trek The Motion Picture, published by Titan, which is going to be an amazing book. Great presentation. Jeff wrote a book previously for Star Trek. He wrote a book on the music of Star Trek. He wrote a book on the art of the Kelvin universe Star Trek films, which, by the way, I hate those movies, but I bought his book because I don't hold it against the art department for what they created. Anyway, great to see that happen. But even though this year is the 40th anniversary of Star Trek The Motion Picture, whenever you think of Star Trek The Motion Picture, you can't help but think of the maestro, director Robert Wise, who directed everything from, well, people would say Rooftops with Jason Gedrick. I know that came out after Star Trek The Motion Picture, but when I think of Robert Wise, I think of The Andromeda Strain. I think of The Day the Earth Stood Still. I think of Curse of the Cat People. I think of the fact that he edited Citizen Kane. Robert Wise was a maestro. Apparently, he also edited The Magnificent Ambersons, which is why Orson Welles was pissed at him for a long time. But anyway, one of my favorite Robert Wise films, he actually co-directed with Jerome Robbins, who was a choreographer on Broadway. And that is, of course, the superlative musical West Side Story. I love West Side Story. As anyone who's ever seen it knows, it is a riff on Romeo and Juliet. I love the film. I think it's terrific. It also, like Star Trek The Motion Picture, begins with an overture. I can't whistle today, but I love it. There's a very long overture that begins with the music, and you see what is a graphic representation of New York City of the time dissolving into the real New York City. And of course, West Side Story is famously about a riff. I know, get it? Riff between the Jets and the Sharks. In New York City, the Sharks are a group of Puerto Ricans. It's a Puerto Rican gang. And of course, Rita Moreno, there are very few women that are as sexy as Rita Moreno is in West Side Story. My God, what a body. She's feminine. She's hippie. I mean, she's just so sexy. And she dances well. And of course, she sings the song, I Want to Live in America. It's so good. I love West Side Story. It's one of my favorite films. I grew up in Seattle when I saw it at the Seattle International Film Festival in 70 millimeter, no less. I mean, I've seen the film. I don't know. It's one of those movies I've watched 50 times. I'm going to admit something that not a lot of people know about me. When I was growing up on Mercer Island, there was a dance studio that was run by a woman named Camille Chrysler. And it was girls doing ballet. There was no guys there. For whatever reason, I developed a fixation on dance for a while. And I joined Camille Chrysler's dance studio to specifically study jazz dancing. Not something that I've told a lot of people, not because I'm ashamed of it, just because it's just not something that comes up a lot in conversation. Now, I will say, this was in junior high, so between 13 and 15. Now, I was a horny dude. I've always been. I love the ladies. I've always loved the ladies. And you know what? By the way, I'm not beyond thinking men like John Barrowman are beautiful specimens of humanity. And I am not beyond man crushes. Mike Coulter, who played Luke Cage, come on. Specifically, I mean, those are beautiful men. I'm big fans of that. While I would definitely consider myself straight, I am not beyond the male crush. However, when I was jazz dancing, I was thinking about West Side Story. I mean, I wanted to be a Jet, because when you're a Jet all the way, from your first cigarette to your last dying day. Jets were cool. And by the way, Bernardo, the leader of the Sharks, my God, what a handsome man he was. Look at that hair. I mean, he could have been Khan Noonien Singh if he was a genetic Superman. Well, anyway, if you guys haven't seen West Side Story, it's streaming. You can watch it. I would say embrace it. What's really interesting is they equate fist fighting to dancing in that film. It's delightfully done. It really is. I love West Side Story. And if you can see it in 70 millimeter, it's kind of like what Ferris Bueller said about that California Ferrari. It's so choice. If you have the means, I do recommend picking one up. And you do, because you can see West Side Story whenever you want. I love it. Well, for those of you who don't know, Steven Spielberg himself has remade West Side Story. If you watch Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, my God, don't you know that Spielberg has always wanted to make a musical? Well, he has. He has remade West Side Story, or he's given us another interpretation of West Side Story. Now, the film is a period piece. It is a riff, of course, I said before, on Romeo and Juliet. It's a riff on Shakespeare. The Jets and the Sharks are the Montagues and the Capulets, and a star-crossed love affair leads to tragedy. But so Spielberg has remade it. And I have to say, man, with that guy's camera work, I've been excited. Baby Driver, he's going to be, I guess he's playing Tony, the lead. But the movie has wrapped. West Side Story is wrapped, and I, for one, cannot be more excited to see this. Seeing Spielberg doing a remake of West Side Story just excites me to no end. I'm very excited about this. So, Dark Horizons reports that 20th Century Fox has announced that production has officially wrapped on Steven Spielberg's new film adaptation of the classic musical West Side Story. Shooting finished up at Steiner Studios and Brooklyn Navy Yards in New York a few days ago. The story explores the young love and tensions between rival gangs, the Jets and the Sharks, on the streets of 1957 New York. Ansel Elgort and Rachel Zegler star in the film alongside Ariana DeBose, Anna Isabel, Corey Stoll, Brian Darcy, James Curtis Cook, and Rita Moreno. Rita Moreno comes back. I mean, I'm sure she's not playing the same role, but I mean, I have to tell you, Rita Moreno in West Side Story was one of those early images that was burned into my mind, as that's just something that is all good in the world. But I love that she's coming back. She still is. Rita Moreno was in Oz, the HBO series Oz. Incredible. Spielberg produces and directs from a script by Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright Tony Kushner, who did, of course, Angels in America. Spielberg penned a letter about the production, which you can read an excerpt from below. He says, "This has been a journey without precedent. A joyful, stunning, moving, endlessly surprising encounter with the story and score of one of the world's greatest musicals. My brilliantly talented, fiercely committed, generous, and apparently inexhaustible cast and crew of hundreds have given our film everything they've got, and I already can say that the film will be releasing December 2020 owes everything to them, as does its immensely grateful director. West Side Story will be released by Disney Studios in the United States on December 18th, 2020. Well, first of all, you might think, my God, they're announcing it wrapped. It wrapped days ago, and it's coming out in basically 2.5 months. Well, this is how Spielberg makes films. I mean, he's one of the most efficient film directors in the world. It's amazing. He has, of course, I would assume Michael Kahn, his longtime collaborator, who's been editing his films ever since Mother Cutter. Verna Fields, one of the greatest film editors of all time, who cut Jaws, has left us. But Michael Kahn has been his longtime collaborator. I don't know if, in fact, Michael Kahn is editing the film, but I hope so. It's amazing because he's like a machine. That's why he can make 2 movies a year. Very excited for this. My God. I'm telling you, I took jazz dancing from Camille Chrysler. I did. And I did for like a year. And to be honest, I was an okay dancer. It was really hard being the only guy in the class because I won't lie. I love the girls wearing tights in the class. That was great. But I did love the dancing. I really did. And it was a time like I didn't want to be Michael Jackson. I wanted to be I wanted to have the moves. And I gave up. I gave up, you guys. I didn't see it through. I just didn't. It was a bummer. I've got a few dance moves, but they're a little basic. I mean, if you look on my Instagram, I was dancing at this horror exhibit, but it's just a little. I didn't come into my own as a dancer, but I still love musicals. I worship Gene Kelly. I worship Fred Astaire. I really do. And I look at An American in Paris. I look at Singing in the Rain. I look at Swing Time or Top Hat. I wanted to be one of those guys. I think I wanted to live in a world before Captain Kirk. I wanted to live in a world where everybody wore 3-piece suits, looked phenomenal, smelled good, danced well, and knew everything. It's kind of the world I wanted to live in. So I'm very excited about Spielberg. Now, I wanted, all this talk about War of the Worlds, there's 2 different versions. There's the BBC adaptation that's about the original book, H.G. Wells' book, takes place, I believe, in the late 1800s. It's Victorian England. Of course, the first favorite movie I ever had, which I talked about early on in Robservations, my first favorite movie when I was 5 years old was Byron Haskin's War of the Worlds. For a 5-year-old kid, there was not a better movie you could possibly imagine. And I've said this before. I was raised a Jew, but at the time, and my best friend was a Catholic kid named Jeff Swafford. Now, I'd gone to church with him for his first communion. Actually, no, not at 5. I did later. But I knew he was Catholic. And of course, in War of the Worlds, even in 1953, when the Martian war machines come out of the gully, one of the first things they do is a priest, Bible in hand, walks. Though I walk through the shadow of the valley of death, I will fear no evil. And then the Martian war machines unleash on a priest. And there is only a shadow and ash left of him. And that was the first time as a kid I remember that life is not safe. Life is not something you can escape. Even a priest with the power of God behind him was not impervious to Martian death rays. And I learned something that I remember thinking that, oh my God, the world is not, it's dangerous. And I think that's why I have such pushback against like woke culture or people that want to censor things. Because when I was a kid, when I was 5 and saw War of the Worlds on Sci-Fi Theater Sunday afternoon, I realized that men of the cloth are not safe from the ravages of Martian heat rays. And that was a rough lesson. I mean, that was scary. As a little kid, you're seeing somebody, an authority figure who you think, okay, maybe he's going to be able to chat with the Martians. No. And if you've ever seen the original War of the Worlds, and you can find it in 4K, it's a beautiful film. A beautiful film. I mean, beautiful looking. And you can get it. It's not available on physical media, but it's available, I believe, on iTunes in 4K. Watch it. And there is a true feeling of, I think what I liked about it as a kid was even at 5, a movie from 1953 felt forbidden. Of course, Steven Spielberg, another maestro, remade War of the Worlds, and people ask me about it. I find War of the Worlds, the new War of the Worlds, to be a hit and miss proposition. The first half is genius. The last half it's kind of like a sci-fi channel, a mid-level sci-fi channel movie at best. But Steven Spielberg is the maestro, and I feel like there's this weird reconsideration about Spielberg going on in culture right now as he remakes West Side Story. But I mean, when I grew up, Steven Spielberg pretty much blew my mind. Jaws was, of course, the first PG movie I ever saw in the theater. I was 8. Ben Garner's Boat. I mean, first giant scare where I leapt out of my seat when Matt Hooper pulls out Ben Garner's head. Then, of course, 2 years later, 6 months after Star Wars came out, Spielberg delivers Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Blew my mind again. Amazing. I mean, and then a couple of years later, he made 1941. Didn't work for me, but I still loved it. Big, epic production. I thought the humor was very heavy-handed, but still beautifully made. Greg Jean's model work, amazing. But then, of course, 1981, Raiders of Lost Ark. I mean, Spielberg, 82, delivers E.T., 84, Temple of Doom. Anything goes, right? And then, of course, we got things like Always, Empire of the Sun, The Color Purple, which I loved. I love The Color Purple. Or as Eric Wallace, who now runs The Flash, a very good friend of mine who is black, once told me that he thought of The Color Purple as the colored people. And I'm like, okay, only you can say that. I loved The Color Purple. I loved Quincy Jones's score. After Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, the second movie I ever cried in was The Color Purple. When Seeley's sister comes back. I mean, it's amazing. I love that film. I love the score. I love Shug Avery. But Spielberg, man, he has been delivering the goods for a long, long time. And I am very, very excited to see West Side Story. Can't wait. Can't wait. What do you guys think? Do you guys like musicals? I mean, I know like people can say like Moulin Rouge or Grease or Purple Rain, but do you guys like classic Singing in the Rain? One of the great musicals of all time, also about the dawn of sound in cinema, which I love. An American in Paris. What are some of your favorite musicals? By the way, if you don't like old musicals, I've talked about this before, but there is a movie called The Lure. The Lure. It is a Polish horror comedic musical about mermaids. Came out 3 or 4 years ago. Criterion put out a Blu-ray. If you have not seen The Lure, like a fishing lure, you got to go look up the trailer, get the Blu-ray, love it. It's great. I mean, I've always loved musicals. I'll never stop loving musicals. Anyway, I mean, it just warms my heart to know we live in a world where Spielberg, who clearly the opening number of Temple of Doom is a total Busby Berkeley throwback to old Hollywood, to see that, and he's never made a musical. And West Side Story will pretty much be the first, and I am expecting a blowout. Now, I don't know anything about it really. I don't know if there hasn't been a trailer yet. I don't think, but it's coming out in 2.5 months. I can't wait for this. I can't wait. I know for all the talk. I think I'm just excited. I'm excited, and I don't like the fact that Spielberg. Did I love Ready Player One? No, even though he gave me the RX-78, the Gundam, my favorite classic Gundam mobile suit. I got to see it portrayed, at least in the virtual world. I've always loved Spielberg. I love his movies, as I've told people before. Lincoln, a movie I bought on Blu-ray and didn't watch for 2 years, didn't see it in the theater. And when I finally watched it, I watched it 3 times in a week. I loved it so much. I'm just a huge fan of Spielberg. I love Munich. I even love Always. A lot of people don't. I do. Think it's great. Anyway, very excited. West Side Story has wrapped. It's coming out in 2.5 months. How that's going to work, I don't know. Maybe it's long takes, not a lot of editing. Very, very excited. How do you guys feel about it? I don't know. Anyway, Anthony Gonzalez is here. He said, if you are driving at night and your music is set at random, would you prefer an Elfman score Batman track or a Zimmer Batman score track? Come on. Well, Anthony, you've given me a very specific criteria. If it's at night and my music is set at random, it depends what kind of a car I'm driving. If I had, say, the new Toyota Supra, which I long to have, I would actually prefer Hans Zimmer. I think Hans Zimmer is better driving music, to be honest, because it's more atmospheric. It's more driving. It's more propulsive. So, good question, though. Jordy54 says, so let's say hypothetically that The Rise of Skywalker Episode 9 doesn't live up to the hype, fails at the box office. What happens, in your opinion, in the months after? Well, clearly, it'll be just like Cormac McCarthy's The Road. We will be living in a nuclear winter. People will be putting infants on spits, roasting them over an open fire, and eating human flesh openly. The government will collapse. Migrants will flow across Europe. There will be a famine, a crisis of epic. No, I'm kidding. I think what's going to happen is that people will just be profoundly disappointed. Star Wars has permeated our pop culture for 42 years, and everyone loves it. I mean, what's so funny about Star Wars to me is I don't think there's any flight of fancy, any result of imagination that is more beloved than Star Wars. And the idea that there's Star Wars that people don't like is so strange. It's so certainly strange for me. I mean, I love Star Wars. I have to tell you, as I'm building my Imaginarium, I actually found a Revell die-cast model kit of a Naboo fighter I haven't built. It's like this big, but it's die-cast. It's metal. I'm like, I don't even remember buying this, but it's awesome, and I love it. It's very cool. It's like a 50s hot rod starfighter. Love it. I think that if The Rise of Skywalker lets people down, I think that I think our community is going to be depressed, bummed out. I really do. Because Star Wars is a foundational cornerstone of every imagination connoisseur's life. And don't you want to love it? I want to love it. Anyway, I think that's what's going to happen. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. Let's hope it's great. Hideaway Killer. Hideaway Killer. Have you seen Necrotonic? I have not seen Necrotonic. It's right up your alley. Well, Hideaway Killer, I have not seen Necrotonic. I don't even know what that is. It's not like Carpenter Brute's upcoming Blood Machines, directed by Seth Eicherman, which is, of course, an expansion of the ideas first put forth in Turbo Killer. By the way, I haven't talked about this on the show. So there is a French directing duo who directs under the name of Seth Eicherman. And they did a music video for a French techno artist named Carpenter Brut. Now, very influenced when you hear his music by the music of John Carpenter. Well, please run, don't walk, but wait till I'm done. And if you're going to leave, hit like or subscribe because I need those likes. I need the subscriptions. But they did a music video together that is an amalgamation of all things 80, crazy Italian sci-fi, French horror, American movies. If you haven't seen the video for Turbo Killer by Carpenter Brut, who is a French techno artist, I saw him live with my director friend Darren Scott. Elizabeth and I went and saw Carpenter Brut perform live. If you haven't seen Seth Eicherman's video for Turbo Killer, you need to see it. And I don't even know, I mean, it might have nothing to do with Necrotonic, but they've just finished a crowd-funded 50-minute movie that debuted at Fantastic Fest called Blood Machines. And look up their crowdfunding campaign. I mean, these two guys are basically do-it-yourself filmmakers doing special effects in the garage. They're amazing. So look up the video for Turbo Killer and look up Blood Machines and go and watch all of the behind-the-scenes stuff they put up. Amazing. I don't know if that has anything to do with Necrotronic, but if you like, I mean, it sounds like it might. Maybe it doesn't. Jordy54 says, I met Spielberg on Saving Private Ryan. So nice. Were you in it, sir? Could be. I don't know. JB Bonifacio says, Once More with Feeling is an underrated musical. For those who aren't in the know, Once More with Feeling was the all-musical episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which I love. Where do we go from here? The battle's won, and we kind of won. So we'll shed our victory tear. Tell me, where do we go? I love that. It's great. I'm telling you, I'm not quite the song and dance man that John Campea is, though. John Campea knows his musicals. He was a former break dancer. John Campea was part of a dance crew. I was not. I might have wanted to be like Shabba-Doo in the Electric Boogaloo films or Shabba Ranks. I was not. John Campea was part of a dance crew. I wasn't. Perhaps for the best. Who knows? Anyway, so I've got letters. I have letters, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, I do. And let's see. I must go get them. I must go get the letters. I've forgotten. I didn't set up enough. I mean, I did. I just hit the button. I can't. Let's see. Let's start. Let's see what sites do we have to show you today? Well, I don't know. I haven't done it. I haven't done a good job. So today, the first letter comes from our man, Franz M. Franz Mohart from Germany. I love this letter, by the way, because it's about The Stand. Of course, last night, Mick Garris signed at Dark Delicacies. For those of you who haven't seen it, the original miniseries for The Stand that Richard Rubenstein, who also produced Dawn of the Dead, produced, came out on Blu-ray, and they've remastered it. So Franz M. says, I'm upset that The Stand is going to be a 10-episode series on All Access. Well, okay. First of all, it's going to be on All Access, CBS All Access. Who has CBS All Access? Just trying to use the prestige of the King's masterwork to get more subscribers because Star Trek isn't quite the smash hit they wanted. That much is true. Second of all, as good as TV has become in recent years, the reality is that it is still a far cry from a wide-release Hollywood blockbuster. And I am disappointed that no studio has the balls to turn The Stand into a 3-part, big-budget, dark fantasy epic in the same vein as Lord of the Rings. You and I, sir, park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. I like The Stand best when it was about the destruction and subsequent rebuilding of society by a group of diverse and well-fleshed out characters with actual character flaws. The novel could have easily been a trilogy of books wherein each individual installment was as long as the massive single volume Stephen King eventually published, except for the fact that King decided he didn't want to write a story about the rebuilding of society as much as he wanted to write about the cyclical clash of good and evil on a global scale. Stephen King chose wisely. In a sense, because the central conflict of The Stand is the same one that takes place inside every human heart in conflict with itself. For all the mysticism and impossible beauty of Middle-earth and its magical creatures in their vivid fantasy land, nothing in The Lord of the Rings is as strangely horrific and relatable as the post-apocalyptic fantasy involving dark Christianity from a modern master of the genre. So many people know The Stand is one of my favorite books I've ever read. I've called it delicious. If you could read it and eat it at the same time, I would say more power to you. And by the way, The Stand is also a subgenre of one of my favorite bits of horror or dark fantasy, the virulent disease kind. I love books about diseases, virulent strains of plague or whatever, superflus, Captain Trips, as it's called in The Stand. And would it surprise you to know that, look, I don't know what people are going to write to me, but Franz wrote me at the same time that our beloved Willow Yang, who, if you don't think that she resides on a mountaintop and can command the weather in much the same vein as Storm, and she can bring down the wrath of God on your head, well, you're not trying hard. But would you believe that Willow Yang wrote me another letter, and it's all about diseases? I mean, perhaps it's because I did mention The Stand and she's read it. But I have to say, I mean, there are a few people in my life that satisfy me the way Willow Yang does, and I've never met her. Never met her. But anyway, I love The Stand. I love the book. I love the characters. It is such an engrossing tome. And Franz is right. They could have made it as a 3-part film. Indeed, the miniseries was done. Maybe it was done in 4 parts. I don't quite remember. I have to get the new Blu-ray. It's been a while since I've seen it, but I loved it. I mean, yes, it was done. What's interesting is The Stand is an epic miniseries about the apocalypse, but it was done on a limited budget. They did what they could. But I still love it. I love the use of Blue Oyster Cult in the beginning. There's the song Larry Underwood sings, "Baby, Can You Dig Your Man?" What did that sound like? Well, The Stand gives us a taste. He's a righteous man. Mother Abigail, Ruby Dee, Ozzie Davis. There's a lot to love about the original Stand miniseries. Franz, look, I understand, but CBS All Access is going to throw a lot of budget behind this. It's Josh Boone, who was going to do the features. I think they were going to do it as 2. I can't wait. Very excited. I love The Stand. Can't wait to see it. But I want to thank you for writing in, because it's great. And what's so funny is that Franz M. he sent me a quick little missive about something that was totally unrelated to The Stand. He didn't even say, "Hey, Rob," he just sent it in. The creators of Game of Thrones making Star Wars movies is a terrible idea if you want them to have the same qualities that made Game of Thrones the best TV show on TV. The intricate plot and political schemes from well-written characters in a realistic fictional world. That was the result of them faithfully following the plot of the novels on which the series is based. The later seasons, not based on the published novels, have been poorly made, with terrible plot lines, numerous inconsistencies, and characters acting out of character, and much dumber than they should be in order to advance the plot. If the Game of Thrones creators were hired to make a literal war movie, that might be a different story. The battles on the show have only gotten better as this series has progressed, but I have zero confidence in their script writing, and you shouldn't either. After all, one of the Game of Thrones showrunners wrote Troy and had a hand in that awful Wolverine script where they sewed Deadpool's fucking mouth shut. Well, Franz, you know what? Hope springs eternal. And by the way, they did bring us, I mean, despite the fact that it was based on the novels, it was their idea. They took the idea to HBO. And remember, there was a plot shot for Game of Thrones that was rejected, not unlike Star Trek. It's just they didn't use it as a flashback. They retooled it and did it again. I mean, that's pretty cool that they did. I mean, I give it up for Weiss and Benioff. They persevered. They provided. We can't poo-poo 8 years and a lot of money and say that, well, it was only. It's hard to make a TV show. And for a long time, they did a really great job. And sure, yeah, they did, in fact, I'm just saying that give them a chance. Give them a chance. I really believe that we should, Franz. I mean, why not? Maybe it'll be great. Maybe they've learned from their mistakes. Who knows? Longtime imagination connoisseur Emil Johansson is here. Emil is always here. Another great letter. Love this. No one's saying, hey, Rob, or greetings, Rob. These are just, what are you, Europeans? You don't think you have to have manners anymore? But anyway, Emil starts this letter in all caps. He says, I'll say it, is art political? Because he put it in all caps. Do you think that pop culture is primarily about escapism or education? Movies could be used to tell important stories from history or with messages the makers feel should be out there. And there's a great way to get points is there's a great way to get points across to a lot of people, because there could be important books out there about racial struggles or whatnot, but it's not until people read X-Men they become aware of it. Well, Ralph Ellison says, hold my beer and read Invisible Man. But is that truly what pop culture is? A form of political activism? No. I don't like hearing actors share their opinions on things because I feel like some innocence is lost, even though I realize they are human beings too. Some people want to boycott certain movies or shows because they associate those with bad messages. Does this mean the makers of these shows or whatever are purposely brainwashing people with propaganda? Or are they just following common sense, meaning they have themes and messages they think are positive, empowering, and good, but to other people it feels like they are pushing an agenda? If they would remove all of that, wouldn't that also be pushing a different agenda? Maybe this means it's unavoidable to not have politics in art. I still believe, though, that pop culture could be purely escapism, not meant to tell people what to think or inspire a moral compass, because in real life, how can we determine what is and what is not the right thing? When we grow up and learn about the world, we learn there are multitudes of opinions and messages out there. We are not just one group ganging up on what we believe is bad. Different people have different opinions, even if they all want what is best. So how can we so selfishly put what we believe to be good in our movies and fictional entertainment, or even educational material, such as documentaries or movies based on historical events? Who is to say that we are right and not pushing our own agenda? I still think you can do fiction that doesn't leave the audience with a message. Movies like Joker, for example, doesn't seem to be a fairy tale with an important life lesson at the end. And that type of art should be allowed as well. We can't force people to follow certain norms or not. Sometimes we just want to drift away into escapism. Right? I think that if people think Frozen is bad for kids because it has a strong female protagonist, you are overreacting. But I also think that you need movies like The Joker to change its entire narrative so it happens to be on the right spectrum of the gun debate. Well, then you are completely missing the point. Thanks for reading my letter. Well, Franz, I want to say I like this letter. I agree with you. I don't understand, as a kid growing up loving science fiction in the 70s, and finally when home video came about, there was a lot of movies put on tape that I'd never seen, like A Boy and His Dog, where it's literally about a sterile community living underground. They find Don Johnson. They want him to impregnate all of their women, and he thinks he's found the greatest place in the world, and eventually they hook him up to a machine where he is literally milked. He becomes a stud for the community. This is what I was watching as a kid. And what I think is interesting, like, did I believe that my entire worldview should be shaped by A Boy and His Dog? No. I was watching a spectrum of things, and my worldview was created as a result of seeing that spectrum. Watching things, everything I saw did not indoctrinate me into one way of thinking. And this weird idea that it would, like, my God, one movie is going to turn everyone into incel homicidal maniacs that are going to blame the fact that they don't know how to talk to girls into the reason why they come out and shoot innocent people to death. I mean, that's absurd. And it's also absurd that people on the internet are blaming their behavior on others. The world is a very three-dimensional place. And I no one movie is ever going to be the flashpoint for or should be to blame for society's ills. Because at the end of the day, movies are inherently entertainment. They are, again, the collision of art and commerce. We all want to make sure that the stories we tell are interesting enough that people go and pay money to see them. And hopefully those stories have enough truth in them. I mean, we all know it's inherent. It's self-evident in a movie, whether films are truthful or not. People love them or they don't. And not every movie ever made, no matter what it's about, is embraced by the public or considered some cause celeb that is being, dissected on the dark web by a bunch of unhappy, shut-ins or whatever. I don't think Joker's that either. And I think that every movie is just a story, the way every book is, the way every comic is, every episode of television. It's all one story. It's all different, but it's all part of the human experience diaspora, which is across the whole planet. So interesting. This letter comes from Koba. Koba, our favorite primate from, as a matter of fact, you know what? Before I read this, I'm going to see if I've got Gilbert on one side of me and I got Tallulah on the other side. Would you like to come up here, Tallulah? They're sleeping, so probably not, but let's see, because I think this would be better. Tallulah, come here. I don't see much. She's sleeping. Would you like a cookie? No. How about you, Gilbert? They are out. They're not going to come up here, which is too bad because this could have used some sense around. Okay, I'll give you a cookie anyway. I threw her a cookie so she can eat it. What about another one? Would you come up here and have? Would you come up so I can eat this? So Koba can have some like three-dimensionality on the show. Tallulah, come here. Oh, she's just eating a. I can't believe it. These dogs. Come here. Oh, okay. Come up. Come here. No. Come here. Come here. Come on. Here, come here. You want to come up? Come on. Wow, I can't believe it. I'm so embarrassed on my own show. Oh, come here. Come on. Come up. No, you gotta come up. Come up. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, how long can I make you wait? I'm begging my own dogs to come on the show. Come on. Come here. All right. It's a short letter. It's already, come here. You want one? Come here. Come here, Tallulah. Come here. I can't, it's embarrassing. Okay, anyway, Koba says, hello, Rob. Today I want to talk about famous dogs of the cinema and TV. You could be here. You could be one. Would you like to come up? Come here. Come on. Come here. She doesn't want, oh man, so embarrassing. I'm giving her a cookie anyway. By the way, they don't have any sugar in them. They're organic. Anyway, hello, Rob. Today I want to talk about famous dogs of the cinema and TV. Like you, I'm a dog owner, and I enjoy the good movie about a dog. Are you listening to this? She walks away. Whether it be the classics like Lassie, Old Yeller, you have Beethoven, the lovable giant St. Bernard, and Air, the sports-loving retriever. You get the tear-jerkers like Marley and Me and Hachi, a dog's tale. That one really got you. And then there are horror movie dogs, Cujo or the Hellhound from The Omen. What are some of your favorite movie and TV dogs? And are there any I missed out on? Well, I mean, my God, first of all, I'm going to put these back in the cookie. I'm embarrassed, ladies and gentlemen, gentle beings, kind people, aliens, anybody who's watching the show. I'm completely disappointed. My dogs let me down. At least they're sleeping next to me. What can I say? They don't always mind me, but they're great dogs. So, Koba, what are my favorite canines? I think my first favorite canine is Pippin. Many of you want to know who Pippin is. Well, it's a Steven Spielberg show. Pippin is the dog that disappears in the ocean in Jaws. His owner has been throwing him a piece of wood, and then off screen, he gets eaten by the shark. Only because his name is Pippin, with all of that literary and musical background, but I that was the first thing that came to mind. Other dogs that I've loved. Scooby-Doo, of course. Why wouldn't you love Scooby-Doo? But what about the dog in Canine? Don't remember that name. But my first favorite dog in any movie is Blood. Blood, Don Johnson's dog from A Boy and His Dog, the greatest dog in the history of cinema. I mean, you could say the Shaggy DA would be up there, but come on, Blood's a rover. I think that Blood, the dog in Boy and His Dog, is my favorite dog in the history of cinema. There you go. What do you guys think? I don't know. Do you believe? Do you believe? Because I don't know. Who doesn't love Blood? Or who hasn't seen it? Wow, there's a lot of people that Stubble McShave, once again, Stubble McShave brings up the fact that I haven't seen The Sound of Music. Stubble says, it's funny that you haven't seen The Sound of Music since you claim to love musicals so much. I know, right? And Elizabeth and Sophie did buy me The Sound of Music on Blu-ray. I know, but and there's Nazis in it, which I love. Willow Yang says, 2 months. I thought it was December 2020. Is it? Is it December 2020? Maybe it is. It is. Did I say 2019? It is 2020. I'm wrong. I was wrong, Willow. You are correct. Thank you for pointing that out. Why would I say it's coming out in 2 months? I'm an idiot. Yes, Spielberg's West Side Story comes out in December of 2020. I was wrong. Brain fart. I apologize. I don't know why I said that. Didn't I read it? Didn't I read and say it was 2020, or did I say it was 2019? I thought I said 2020, but yes, to be clear, I made a mistake. It doesn't come out in 2 months. It comes out in 2020. So it comes out in a year and 2 months. I'm an idiot. You know why? My brain is already in 2020. So I apologize for that. You're right. I did read that it was December 2020. I don't know why I said that. Factual Opinion says Star Trek 6 has to be my favorite TOS film. I like Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country, which was the original title, as we all know, of Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. It was originally called The Undiscovered Country. I like Star Trek 6. I don't love it. I think it's a little didactic and a little preachy, perhaps. But I do. There's so much in it that I love. Don't wait for the translation. Answer me now. I love General Chang. It's a great movie. It's so good. But it's not. You know what? It is good. It's low budget. I just don't like, I mean, the fact that Kirk is totally an unmitigated racist. Let them die. I'm like, really, dude? Come on. You liked Captain Koloth. Ah, my dear Captain Koloth. Ah, my dear Captain Kirk. You know, but I get what they're doing. I do. I understand. I understand what they were doing. It's fine. It's fine. Hideaway, Hideaway Killer says it's okay. Rob definitely has a time machine. I know I'm mistaken. And by the way, how'd you know? I travel through time with my sports almanac, making money. No, I'm just kidding. Stubble McShave says, FYI, the Wheel of Time fan community is busy trying to analyze and break down a 1-minute segment of the first table read that was published by Amazon today. First of all, our man Stubble, who is in Sweden, I don't think his enthusiasm for the Wheel of Time miniseries or a series based on Robert Jordan's books, I mean, I don't think that I love it. You think I'm a big fan? I think Stubble McShave needs to start his own Wheel of Time YouTube show and come on and talk about it, because by God, does he love the Wheel of Time, and I love him for it. Willow Yang is back. She says, I just heard about Marriage Story with Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson. It looks like Netflix is rolling out some strong Oscar contenders this year. They are. For those of you who don't know, that is Noah Baumbach's new film, Marriage Story with Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson. Interestingly enough, they put out 2 trailers for the film where the trailers are from each one of their perspectives. It looks great. I think Noah Baumbach and his former flame, Greta Gerwig, have an interesting competition going on to see who can make the most Oscar-winning film. I think it's great. I love it. It looks terrific. I love Adam Driver as an actor. I certainly love Scarlett Johansson. So I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, I agree. Willow, they're killing it. Netflix. Look, if you guys don't go see the 3.5-hour Irishman in the theater, you're dead to me. Anyway, Adam Blue says, Carpenter Brute and Gundam discussion in one show. This is definitely where I belong. Well, Adam Blue, Gundams are never far from my heart. Here's a perfect grade. It's not done, but as everyone knows, I love Gundam, and if I can get that new Metal Solid, I love the new Gundam from Char's Counterattack, one of the great Gundams of all time. I would be a happy man. But I love Gundam, and for those of you who don't know Gundam, a lot of them are being released on Blu-ray now, which is terrific, fantastic. You got to check out Gundam. If you don't know Gundam, you should check it out. And if you want, a good place to start for new Gundam people, because you want to see new animation, start out with Gundam Unicorn. Try it. Just try it. See if you dig it. I think you might. Or Gundam Origin. JB Bonifacio says, I recently picked up Bob Iger's book, and the first note mentioned that he wouldn't have made it without Willow. Is Willow Bob Iger's wife? I mean, Willow could have been catfishing us this whole time, and she is indeed married to Bob Iger. In which case, I would say to Willow, look, man, can I get a job at Marvel or Lucasfilm? I'd love that. But I don't know. I mean, I think Willow is just a great name. Willow is soothing. Willow is sexy. Willow is somebody, it's a person you want to come home to. Just to say, Willow, I've been thinking about you all day. Anyway, that's what Willow makes me think of. And so I'm glad to know that there is a Willow in Bob Iger's wife. And if it is indeed Willow Yang, I say, Willow Yang, why wouldn't Bob Iger be enamored of a woman that's getting a PhD in molecular biology? That's why I say. JB Bonifacio says, he already said that. I read that. Just Plain Steve says, Train to Busan, Space Cowboys. Enjoyed them both quite a bit. What is your next random suggestion, Rob? Maybe something spooky for October. Well, what Just Plain Steve is referring to, Train to Busan is a Korean zombie film. There's actually another film that's animated. It's part of that sequence, and they're making Train to Busan. If you're tired of the zombie genre, Train to Busan kicks ass. Space Cowboys is a Clint Eastwood film about aging cowboys, including James Garner, Clint Eastwood himself, and of course Tommy Lee Jones. It's worth seeing if you like space. And I throw out these random suggestions. All right, random, maybe something spooky for October. Okay, I'm going to give you guys some random suggestions. First of all, a movie called The Sentinel. It's not a great movie, but it's interesting. You got to see it. The Sentinel, late 70s film about the doorway to hell and who guards it. It's very interesting. I would then say, of course, Andrei Zulawski's Possession, starring Sam Neill and Isabelle Adjani. Don't even read anything about it. Just go watch it. It's 1981. It's on Blu-ray. You can get it. Possession is interesting. You know what? Stan Winston's directorial debut, a movie that people talk about but haven't seen very much, Pumpkinhead. Pumpkinhead. It's a B movie for sure. Pretty good. I think you're going to dig Pumpkinhead. Check it out. I think Pumpkinhead is the kind of movie you guys might like. Those are just, I talk about random movies on the show, and I don't pay much attention, but those are some. Willow Yang says Old Yeller was the first book that made me cry. First of all, I love you gotta love Willow Yang because she tells you that Old Yeller was the first book as opposed to the movie. That's why we love Willow. And yes, Willow, but don't you think Old Yeller was crassly manipulative? I kind of do, but it's great. I love Old Yeller. Razman's Reality is here. Says, other than The Wrath of Khan, the one that I always go back to watch over and over again is First Contact. So I would have to say that's definitely my other favorite. No doubt, but there's a demarcation point to me between The Undiscovered Country, Star Trek 6, and of course Generations, which would be called Star Trek 7, but there's no number there. First Contact, even though I wrote an article called Why First Contact is the Worst Star Trek Movie, that was true in 1986. It certainly isn't true now. I think Star Trek 6 it was Jonathan Frakes' first time at bat as a feature film director. I think it's pretty good, but there's a lot about it that I think was a rehash and was done better in the show, but still good stuff. Still good stuff. And again, I like to hear what people love. It depends what time it was when you saw it. Jamie Cruz says, thoughts on doing director commentary live here on Free Enterprise? Maybe a TV in the background we can barely see. Got to be a fair use way. Hey, look, man, no one's going to come after you if I show Free Enterprise and do a live commentary. But there is already commentaries on the DVD. Shatner, Eric McCormack, and Rafer Weigel, Mark Altman, and myself. I could do that, but the problem with Free Enterprise, it's a forgotten film, and unless you guys know it, I would hate to be the first time that you saw Free Enterprise. And by the way, I'm still hopefully trying to get a Blu-ray out of Free Enterprise. That would be great. But I wouldn't mind doing that. Maybe if Hills Run Red comes out on Blu-ray, we could have a watch party or something. Even though I only produced it, we might be able to. Hard to say. Who knows? Who knows? I don't know. But that's not a bad idea. I mean, I'm not adverse to it. Mark C says, my creepy random suggestion, Dreamscape with Dennis Quaid and Kate Capshaw. Dreamscape, of course, with special effects by Dream Quest Images. Dreamscape's a pretty cool movie. I have a one sheet for that. David Patrick Kelly from Warriors fame. Warriors come out to play. Yay. He turns into a snake creature. I like Dreamscape a lot. Maurice Jarre does the score for that film. It's very interesting. I would watch it. It's funny. Dennis Quaid, like the MVP of movies like, what was it, Enemy Mine or Dreamscape or Inner Space. I mean, or The Right Stuff. Who's the best pilot you ever saw? I thought he had a pretty great career in the early 80s in terms of genre cinema. But yeah, Dreamscape. I like Dreamscape. If you guys haven't seen Dreamscape, check it out. It's a lot of fun. I recommend it. I do indeed. I've got more letters today. Let's see what we got. Ladies and gentlemen, drum roll. Everybody sit at home and go, do that, because Willow Yang has sent a letter. And Willow Yang has sent a letter that is not necessarily, it's not about Star Trek. And whenever Willow Yang sends in a letter, my heart gets bigger. It pulses out of my chest like in a cartoon, like a Warner Brothers cartoon. My heart goes boom, 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 boom. And again, I haven't met Willow, but her writing is just as seductive as anything else about a woman I've known. So here she comes, walking down the street. Do-wa-diddy-diddy, dum-diddy-dee. Willow Yang, ladies and gentlemen. Greetings, existential Mr. Rogers. On the subject of disease outbreak movies, I'm sending over an analysis for Wolfgang Petersen's Outbreak, starring, of course, Dustin Hoffman. There's a little Donald Sutherland in there. I like Outbreak. I actually watched the movie on the recommendation of Swack Props, who wanted to hear my input on its depiction of a viral epidemic. Well, here are my thoughts on the subject. Ladies and gentlemen, this might be the first time Willow Yang has written a letter based on someone else's review. Of course, I would be remiss if I did not mention that Swack Props in Malaysia, Cal, go to his Etsy store, look up Swack Props. I think it's S''WAK, second word props. He made me a copy of The Nine Gates of the Kingdom of Heaven from Roman Polanski's The Ninth Gate. Cal makes prop books, and his work is top-notch. It's better than any prop you'd actually get from a set if you worked on a movie. The man is amazing. And if you have a friend that's an Indiana Jones fan, Swack Props has been making Grail Diaries, Henry Jones's Grail Diary from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Check out his Etsy store. My God, what a talented dude. Anyway, so Swack Props has inspired Willow Yang to write a letter. I will say right off the top that I didn't find Outbreak to be the most scientifically accurate and intellectual film that I've seen. Probably the most educational part of the movie happened near the beginning, where the viewers were given a tour of the laboratories at the USAMRIID. I always say USAMRIID. It's actually an acronym. It's USAMRIID. And I first heard about USAMRIID, I think, when I was reading The Hot Zone, Richard Preston's book, The Hot Zone, which they made into a TV miniseries. It was based on a true story. And informed on what all the different biohazard safety levels mean. I also appreciated the origins of the Motaba virus, which was clearly inspired by Ebola and had the exact same structure as the latter. The disease originated in the African jungle and spent decades infecting the local populations before it was actually able to evolve and begin spreading elsewhere. A course that seemed pretty feasible. Outbreak did contain a fair amount of silliness. That's difficult for me to ignore. The entire viral epidemic in the movie was instigated through a series of idiotic actions and decisions by people that should have known better. One pivotal point occurred when a hospital technician got infected by a mutated strain of the virus when a sample of a patient's blood exploded in his face and subsequently passed the infection on to a number of other people, thereby creating an outbreak. As someone who works in a laboratory, the scene made me facepalm. Now, safety protocols have certainly come a long way over the decades. There used to be a time when researchers would smoke in the lab while carrying out experiments. Admittedly, I don't know what the standards in the 90s were like. They were probably much laxer than they are now today. With this disclaimer in mind, let me just list off all of my grievances with the scene. First of all, the technician's clearly a moron who was so distracted by whatever he was listening to on the radio that he would stick his hand inside a centrifuge that's still spinning. Something that no trained worker in their right mind would ever do, resulting in the accident. Secondly, there was one tube inside the centrifuge. This defies the laws of physics. The rotating mass must be balanced. In other words, there has to be a tube of equal mass directly opposite to the one containing the blood sample in order for a centrifuge to work. Even small imbalances in mass can seriously damage the rotor and will cause the centrifuge to violently shake and fall off the table. Thirdly, the function of a centrifuge is to separate matter in a solution through the application of centrifugal force that's obtained by spinning samples down at high velocities. The blood, if it had been spun down properly, should have been separated, with all of the heavier red blood cells sedimented on the bottom of the tube and the liquid on the top. The blood that sprayed the technician looked like whole blood, indicating that he hasn't spun the sample down long enough before trying to take it out, which again harkens back to his gross incompetency. So much for verisimilitude. I own Outbreak on Blu-ray. Never again, Willow. Never again. Fourthly, the technician should have used the eye wash station or emergency showers to wash off the blood as per safety protocols, rather than sticking his head under a sink. He should also have probably been wearing some kind of facial protection, such as masks and goggles. Finally, there's the almost criminally negligent doctor who didn't take the accident seriously, didn't seem to realize that his assistant clearly needed a refresher in basic laboratory procedures and safety protocols, and completely dismissed the possibility of any dangerous infections in spite of the blood sample having been taken from a critically ill patient. I don't want to sound too harsh, but honestly, if researchers were that moronic, well, they probably deserve to get infected. Another important point of the movie that I found to be rather preposterous from a scientific perspective was the resolution. The characters were able to capture the original monkey that was carrying the mutated strain of virus and use its antibodies to cure every infected person, even ignoring the ludicrously short amount of time that it took for the researchers to extract the antibodies, and the fact that the antibodies were apparently a miracle drug that could cure infections with 100% efficacy that and elicits absolutely no dangerous side effects, neither of which are, of course, realistic. There's also the issue of mass production. There was only one small monkey carrying the antibodies toward the virus. All of the anti-serum that could have been produced from the animal were likely expended in curing Rene Russo. Well, she is Rene Russo, and as far as, middle-aged woman, she's someone you want to save. Just saying. Contrast that with the movie Contagion, where the development of the vaccine was only one step in resolving the pandemic. There were mass shortages and the limited doses being administered via a lottery system over the course of many months. By the way, if you guys have not seen Steven Soderbergh's Contagion, it's one of my favorite disease movies. If you love movies about virulent diseases and disease vectoring and plagues of any kind, Contagion is the movie for you. Realistically, there was no feasible way that the people in Outbreak could have been able to produce enough serum in time to cure all of the infected victims that were being quarantined in the town. Everyone there was as good as dead. They might as well just have dropped the bomb. In spite of my issues regarding the scientific inaccuracies in Outbreak, I did enjoy it for what it was. Outbreak was a very different type of deadly infectious disease movie from something like Contagion, whereas Contagion strove for a more grounded, realistic depiction of a viral pandemic. Outbreak was more of an action thriller, with government conspiracies, helicopter chases, some cheesy dialogue and stock characters, and a good, healthy dose of melodrama. While I didn't think that it is necessarily a great movie, it's also very entertaining and featured a stellar cast that included Dustin Hoffman, Rene Russo, Morgan Freeman, Cuba Gooding Jr., and an unrecognizable Christopher Plummer. Sorry, I just can't resist. It's a flick where I can just shut off my analytical brain and appreciate it for its fun and excitement. I will end my letter with just some more thoughts on deadly viral outbreaks. Understandably, in films, it is tempting to create a virus that is as contagious and lethal as possible to generate fear. Realistically, however, these two properties often don't go hand in hand. It isn't actually in the virus's best interests to be too deadly. Virus are, I love this. I love Willow. I love you. I truly do. I have great big love for you. Listen to this. She schools us while entertaining at the same time, as the best teachers are. Viruses are dependent on their host to propagate. If they end up killing their host too soon, before they've had the opportunity to transmit a new one, they'll doom themselves as well. This is particularly true for a virus that causes extreme and horrific symptoms like the Motaba virus. When an infected host begins exhibiting such symptoms, it'll be immediately recognized by others who will probably avoid the victim, thereby making it more difficult for the virus to transmit. There's an evolutionary dynamic between viruses and their hosts that often constrains the deadliness of the more successful pathogens. To illustrate this, I will use the example of the Maxima virus, which is a pox virus that infects rabbits. Maxima was introduced into Australia in the 1950s in an attempt to control the invasive feral rabbit populations there. For a time, the ploy appeared to be a resounding success. The virus had nearly 100% mortality rate, and mass colonies of rabbits were dying off, causing the population to plummet by about 600%. Within just a couple of years, however, the virulence of the virus severely declined. This is due both to the selection pressure the virus puts on its host to become more resistant, and also the selection pressure on the virus itself to become less virulent in order to better transmit between hosts. The rabbit population has subsequently recovered, and to this day, they remain an ecological problem in Australia. As Dr. Ian Malcolm says, life finds a way. Best regards, Willow. Well, Willow, since we're talking about The Stand, I can't thank you enough for writing in that letter. Everyone at home, a golf clap. Come on, Willow Yang, for being a mainstay here. You know what? I have more emotion. I have more of an emotional attachment to a woman in Canada I've never met named Willow than any person I've ever known in my life. So one day I hope to meet her. I really do. We shall see. Mark C. also said, your Carpenter Brute video is a cross between the Paul Bettany's Legion and the Wachowski's Speed Racer. Well, yes, and I would say that is the ingredient, sir, of awesome. Turbo Killer rules. It's got a lot of Lucio Fulci in there, a little bit of the Beyond. It's got a little Italian sci-fi. There's so much in Carpenter Brute's Turbo Killer. It's awesome. But now go look up Blood Machines, getting great notices at its debut at Fantastic Fest this year. I cannot wait, even though it's only an hour long. Glad you looked at it. Mukbang Reviews sends in 5 films I saw too young. Blue Velvet, Heavy Metal, Fatal Attraction, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and The Elephant Man. I love them all now. Speak on any of them. Thanks for your shows. Well, I saw all of those movies with the exception of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which I didn't see on first release. You know, I was 11, and for whatever reason, I couldn't get anyone to take me. I first saw it on home video. And by the way, if you want to see a great trailer, a great movie trailer, if you think great movie trailers for genre cinema weren't done in the 70s, look up the trailer for Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the Philip Kaufman version. One of the great ad lines of all time, the great taglines. Movies don't have taglines anymore, but they used to. They would encompass the film in one tagline. Invasion, the 1978 Philip Kaufman Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Here's the tagline. The seed is planted. Terror grows. Come on. That was so good. I don't know who wrote that. I'll tell you one thing. I do know Craig Mazin, ladies and gentlemen. Craig Mazin, who just won an Emmy Award for Chernobyl. I used to work with him at an ad agency in the mid-90s. He wrote the ad line, the tagline for Crimson Tide. Danger runs deep. Telling you, it was great taglines are tough. I did come up with one for Tango Shalom. Actually, two. Rabbi Moshe Yehuda is about to discover that divine intervention can be rather unorthodox. Come on. I thought that was great. I came up with that. And then, of course, they changed it. They changed it to the only person who wants Rabbi Moshe Yehuda to dance the tango is the Almighty. Not as good. I'm just saying. I didn't write that one. But so, look, all of those things. Blue Velvet, incredible. I saw it in college. Heavy Metal I'll tell you when I saw Heavy Metal. Heavy Metal was playing at the UA 150, UA 70 on 6th and Blanchard in downtown Seattle, where Star Wars and Empire played. I saw Empire Strikes Back 26 times in that theater. It opened, I want to say it opened in either late July or early August in 1981. And the Seafair Parade was happening in Seattle when we were trying to get to the theater, and we had to cross one of the streets. I think it was 6th and Blanchard, actually. And it was hard to get there. So we finally got to see Heavy Metal. I saw it in the theater. Elephant Man, a Paramount release. Love that. I was not up on my David Lynch then, of course, but I did love Elephant Man. I thought it was great. Fatal Attraction, of course, I loved. I will not be ignored, Dan. I'll tell you something about Fatal Attraction. I'll freely admit it. I had a thing for Glenn Close. I really did. I loved her in World According to Garp, and she was like she was a total MILF in The Big Chill. She was married to Kevin Kline. I mean, she asked her own husband to sleep with one of her best friends to impregnate her because she didn't have a boyfriend. I mean, I loved Glenn Close. And when I saw Fatal Attraction, they made a woman, they even when she was topless, they made her as unattractive as possible. They gave her a terrible haircut. And I think Glenn Close has I would call her, she was like academically beautiful. She's the kind of if she was a college professor, you'd have a thing for her. She wasn't necessarily classically beautiful or California beautiful, but there was something about Glenn Close that drove me wild. And I did not like what they did to her in Fatal Attraction. I didn't like it. I understand why Michael Douglas she was very sexy. She's very sexy in an academic way, but they went out of their way to especially after the fact, to make her unattractive, not physically appealing, which I thought that wasn't fair. And here's my thing about Fatal Attraction. Anne Archer, star of Hero at Large, is so sexy. Like, there's one scene in that movie where she's sitting down doing her makeup and brushing her hair or something, and you see her midriff. I mean, she is so sexy. And I understand. I get it. She's out of town. She's so sexy. Even as much as I loved Glenn Close, I had a hard time coming to grips with that after seeing Anne Archer and her exposed tummy in the beginning of Fatal Attraction, that Michael Douglas would not just be thinking about tearing her underwear off with his teeth next time she came home. I had a problem with that. I was like, my verisimilitude in Fatal Attraction was, I get it, they had to set it up, but man, when you've got a delicious wife at home that you just, you know what I'm saying? It's a little hard to believe for me that, anyway, and I love Glenn Close. I get it. But I'm like, Anne Archer, Hero at Large. I mean, she became Jack Ryan's wife. She was a doctor in Clear and Present Danger. Delish. So, again, maybe too much information about my own thought process. But when I'm making a movie, I would be thinking those kinds of things. I'd be like, you got to make it, you got to play it up. Okay. Mark C throws out, name the tagline. Somewhere, somehow, someone's going to pay. Commando, man. That is Commando. John Matrix. I think. I could be wrong. I think it's Commando. Just saying. What a great tagline. By the way, I love that tagline. I think it's one of the great taglines. How can you not? Another letter from Brian Eng. Brian Eng says, would you say the great grandfather of woke cancel culture is the rule that artists cannot draw a depiction of Muhammad? I feel that you are sensitive to people's beliefs, but not at the cost of artistic expression. I think that's actually, Brian, I think it's a really good point. Here's my problem with fundamentalist Islam, as it is with any fundamentalist interpretation of religion. You're not taking into consideration the culture marching forward. Islam at one point in the world, I mean, before the imams took over in the 14th century, Islam was one of the pillars of mathematics, the foundations of science is the Islamic religion. I mean, what was going on there was amazing, and we have the foundations of science were started. I mean, there was a lot of things that Islamic culture did for mankind. Of course, as with Judeo-Christian, around the time of in the Middle Ages, let's just say, I am not up on my history. Somebody else is much smarter than me. I know general terminology. I know that the imams sort of took over and fundamentalism took hold in Islam. I want to say 14th century. Again, don't know. But it was unfortunate because what has happened is that Islamic thought, I think, has been, or at least Islamic fundamentalism has not allowed Islam to have the same kind of reformation that, say, Catholicism or Christianity, whatever. The Renaissance did not happen in Islam. And I think that that's problematic. And by the way, this is a gross oversimplification of it all. But I think the idea that Islamic fundamentalism would want to go after their legalistic interpretation of the hadiths and the Quran would make people want to kill somebody because of a drawing is problematic in the modern age. And I think that, again, I've always said that all religious belief should be impervious to inquiry. You should welcome inquiry no matter what, even if you're not religious, whatever you believe. Always challenge your beliefs. Always challenge what you know. Always put them to the test, whether it's peer-reviewed or not. There's nothing wrong with if your beliefs, if your heartfelt beliefs are real and you truly believe in them, then they should stand up to scrutiny. They should. And perhaps you're right. I mean, the problem with woke culture is we know what happened in Holland. The wrong depiction of Muhammad gets you killed. Well, in my mind, that negates your entire religion. But that's, again, fundamentalism. And we have crazy fundamentalism here. And I think that what makes me sad about fundamentalism, I once heard that one day that the great religions of the world, the great religious leaders and the great scientists will one day meet on the top of the same mountain and realize that the answers that they were seeking are all in the same place. And I like that idea. I like that idea. I think that there's a lot of good contained in religious thought, but like any other idea, you've got to be able to talk about it and consider it. And yet, for those who are true believers, they believe that it's like, here's what I don't get. The world has changed. We know science has moved on. And our religious texts do not reflect what we know about science, what we know about the heavens. They don't. And they were given to us, if you are believers or true believers, devout believers, legalistic believers, we were given these things hundreds and thousands of years ago. The world changes. And I feel the same way about, interpretations of our own Constitution. A well-regulated militia. What does that mean? The idea that beliefs need to be locked in stone the way they were. I mean, our society isn't the same as it was 10 years ago or 12 years ago when we got smartphones. Look at how different our culture is and how different we communicate in 12 years because of technology. And we're upholding things that were written hundreds, if not thousands of years ago, and saying they're not open to interpretation. I mean, that's like saying, well, we need to, whatever they said 1,000 years ago or 600 years ago, we have to adhere to that. And you don't take into consideration evolution or whatever. But your question is I don't think that I don't think that's it. I think that here's the thing: killing somebody because of the depiction of Muhammad, I don't think it's not right. Because what you're doing then is you're saying that, oh, the sin of murder because they've defamed the prophet is somehow excusable, but no, it's not right. Both of those things are wrong. First of all, why the depiction of Muhammad is there are many devout people that believe in the Quran, the Hadiths, that Islam is very important in their lives. Do I think that we should? I don't like the fact that it's very easy for us to mock religion. You know, I am not a religious person, but there are many people on the planet that are. There are many people in our government that are very religious, and they're trying to do the right things. Now, mocking somebody's religion, mocking somebody's deeply held beliefs, what that does is create a gigantic barrier in front of you or anyone being able to have a conversation with that person. And if you're not going, there's a lot of people that believe a lot of different things. And I think as long as we recognize, that's why I say every person has a story to tell. We have to recognize what we believe, whether we believe them or not. We have to understand what they believe, what they hold dear. And if you can't respect that about a person, you can't have a dialogue, and you're never going to reach a middle ground, because what you're doing is you're putting that person on the defensive and you're mocking their beliefs. How are they supposed to take that? If you're a devout Muslim and you've been studying Islam your whole life and somebody comes along and defames your prophet, how are you supposed to feel about that? I understand we in the West or whatever, but again, it's what one person is doing is monumentally disrespecting a bunch of millions, billions of people's, well, a billion plus people's religious beliefs. And I get it. You know what? You need to be fairly evolved to have to be able to accept parody and mockery of your beliefs. You do. You have to be able to shine it on and brush it off. There's a lot of people that can't or don't or won't or haven't learned to. And I just think that, again, it goes back to respect. It goes back to respect. I mean, you've got over 1 billion Muslims on this planet. Now, do I think Islamic fundamentalism is a good thing? No. Do I think Christian fundamentalism? Do I think Jewish fundamentalism is a good thing? I don't. I don't, because we have many people on the planet, and we all, if you're going to have a conversation, you need to be able to talk to them about what's the here and now. All of our conversations should deal with the here and now, not the afterlife, not what you read in a book. It needs to deal with what's in front of us right now. You know, if you live in a neighborhood with 10 houses and 1 watering hole, you got to keep the watering hole clean, because it serves all 10 houses. That is the immediate needs. If you're going to talk about the fact that God is going to miracle clean water to you, that's problematic. That's not dealing with reality. That's what I think. So woke culture, what I think about woke culture is woke culture is all about people that want to do good. They're trying to do good for people, but they're trying to do good, and their desire supersedes human nature, supersedes reality, supersedes day-to-day existence, supersedes a lot of other things. You can't be woke and that's all you are. You have to be woke in addition to the rest of life. It's got to be 3-dimensional. It can't just be one thing, because there's a lot more going on. You know what? I want to treat everybody equally. I want to be a good person. But the fact is, if my grass needs to be mowed or I need to water my olive trees, which I, by the way, do. If I need to water my olive trees to get olives, whether I'm woke or not is not going to make sure that those olive trees get watered. So it's all part of a continuum. I know I probably went off that way, but hey, I don't know if that answered the question. Just things that I've thought. What can I say? Ladies and gentlemen, Ian Samuels is back, a man who sent me a book that he wrote. Amazing. And somebody who wrote a letter. This will be the final letter of today. I love this letter. Ian Samuels writes, after the phenomenon that was Brian Fuller's visionary Hannibal TV series, let us go back to where it began. Before Silence of the Lambs, the first adaptation of a Thomas Harris Lecter book was Michael Mann's. And by the way, I have to say that Ian Samuels spelled Hannibal Lecter's last name correctly. Was Michael Mann's Manhunter, released in 1986. The film was based on Hannibal's first appearance in Harris's novel, Red Dragon. The story follows FBI special agent and profiler Will Graham as his old friend, FBI agent Jack Crawford, drags him out of retirement to help him catch a killer that some of the investigating officers have nicknamed the Tooth Fairy, as he had left bite marks on his female victims. We discover that Graham chose to retire after a long stay in hospital, recovering from wounds, and a further stay in a mental health unit. He needed help to pull himself away from the dark thoughts he had allowed to inhabit his mind. He had allowed himself to think like the killer to aid in capturing him. He'd been working on helping bring in a murderer called Garrett Jacob Hobbs, but in doing so met psychologist Hannibal Lecter. Graham realized that Lecter was the one who had killed a number of female students, but went to call the police when Lecter attacked him, almost gutting him. To help find the Tooth Fairy, he must get into the mindset again, so he decides to visit Lecter in his cell in a special institute run by Dr. Chilton. In Manhunter, Hannibal Lecter is brilliantly, darkly, and eerily played to perfection by English actor Brian Cox. Hannibal is deliberate, he is conniving, he is able to twist people to his whim, he is incredibly intelligent, he is depicted as an incredibly dangerous individual. After speaking with Hannibal, who finds it so easy to push Will's buttons, Will gets what he wants and then literally flees from the interview with Lecter. The film was well-paced and well-written, a worthy adaptation of the source material, and has an excellent cast. William Peterson, who plays Will Graham, went on to find success playing a similar role in CSI Crime Scene Investigation. Brian Cox, as already mentioned, gives a measured, intelligent performance as Lecter. By the way, I maintain there would be no CSI if William Peterson was not in Manhunter. Interestingly, despite none of the cast from Manhunter being brought into the 1991 adaptation of Silence of the Lambs, Frankie Faison, who played Lieutenant Fisk, a police chief in Manhunter, appeared in Silence of the Lambs as Barney, the friendly jailer who also reprising his role in both Hannibal and Red Dragon. Also, Dan Butler, who appeared as one of the lab techs in Manhunter, went on to appear as the moth expert in Silence of the Lambs. In 2002, we got a version of Red Dragon, which actually uses the title of the book and uses many of the same actors from Hannibal and Silence of the Lambs. One of the biggest issues with the 2002 adaptation is the character of Frances Dollarhide, the Tooth Fairy. In Michael Mann's Manhunter, we are presented with the dominating form of 6 feet 5 inch Tom Noonan. In Red Dragon, we have the 5 feet 11 inch Ray Fiennes, but Ray Fiennes can do no wrong. Another man I have a man crush on. Fiennes is an excellent classically trained actor, but you wouldn't believe it based on this almost comic performance. At no time does Fiennes of the menace and danger that Tom Noonan's performance offered. Of course, it could be argued that Fiennes' performance fits in with what had been established by wealth actor Anthony Hopkins. His performance as Lecter was just as comic. It just wasn't as believable and as terrifying as that of Brian Cox. Hopkins' version of Lecter feels like it belongs in a comic book. I feel sorry for those who were introduced to Hopkins as Lecter without having seen Cox's performance in Manhunter. They've been ruined by an inferior product. Of course, both performances by Hopkins and Cox pale in comparison to the amazing performance we got from Mads Mikkelsen in the groundbreaking TV series Hannibal. But in conclusion, I highly recommend Manhunter. It is an excellent film. Admittedly, the soundtrack is an odd choice. The first half of the film has a very 80s synth vibe, which feels more at home in Blade Runner, but it finds its feet with 80s rock of the second half of the film, with the action being backed by the epic in length In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida by Iron Butterfly helps build the tension. Go watch it if you haven't already. But by the way, Manhunter uses one of my favorite 80s bands, Shriek Back, in a very great way, especially the track Coelacanth. So, yeah, anyway, which I think is great. I love Manhunter. It's very different. I'm a huge Michael Mann fan. Good stuff. By the way, Ian, nice letter. I appreciate that. I love going back and doing deep dives or reading about things back in the day. I hope Mark C. I was right about Commando. I think I was. But ladies and gentlemen, that brings me to the end of Robservations, episode 238. I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for supporting the chat. I want to thank you for going to theburnetwork.net and writing letters. I especially want to thank my amazing moderators, of course, Detective Jim, the Sheriff of Nottingham, Terry. I don't know if he could be here. Greg Smith, who's building a 1-to-1 scale snowspeeder. He was sick today. And of course, the Honorable Mayor Mike Bodden, who is ladies and gentlemen, Mike is in the fight of his life to be reelected to his mayorship. Do you say mayorship? Your honor, to his honorship of being mayor of Riverdale, Iowa. My God, don't you want to have a mayor as one of your moderators? Hopefully, you're going to meet all of us if you go to London in April 2nd, I guess. Leicester Square. No Time to Die. It's going to be great at the Odeon Cinema. Anyway, I'm going to say it again. I just want to say that every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. I usually say listen. That's the best way to do it. But anyway, I didn't. Oh, Stephen Foley sent something in. Stephen Foley, always trying to get something in right there. You know, he's sending me a super chat at the end of the day. I want to say thank you. Stephen says, Rob, I love your open-mindedness. We don't often agree politically, but we love the same movies. We need to be able to speak with each other. Absolutely, Mr. Foley. I agree with that 100%. And why not? Even if we argue, as I've said, we all have the baseline of loving Cinefantastique. We're all imagination connoisseurs here, are we not? You know, it's like what James Tiberius Kirk said to Matt Decker in the Doomsday Machine as he was about to fly one of the Enterprise shuttlecrafts down the maw of the planet killer. He said, "We're stronger with you than without you," and I believe that's true of everyone here. And on that note, I will say to all of you people, have a better day. I'll see you tomorrow on the John Campea Show. Joker starts. Are you guys going to see Joker tomorrow? My God. And by the way, let me just say, I don't know what's going to happen, but Elizabeth made her first real film. She made a minute-long movie, and it was pretty impressive. She shot it herself. She edited the film herself. She's in film school today. I can't wait to hear what happened. And it's great. And remember, if you like these chats, please hit like, please subscribe, please share, whatever you want to do. Or if you think I'm a monumental douchebag, go in the comments section and tell me why. But at least hit like first, because at least you got a chat where you could hate me enough to say I was a douchebag. And there's something to be said for that. At least I was somewhat entertaining. Thanks for all of you who wrote letters. And as always, have a better day.